My name is Ron Carson. Yeah, well, my great-great-grandmother, Rachel Scott, built this building in 1939 for the black children of Pennington Gap and surrounding areas. My mother was the first group in 1939, 1940 to attend this little one-room school. And I was in the last group in 1965 when we integrated. So it has a special meaning to me. The first 7 years of my education was in this building. At the most, I would estimate maybe 25 kids at the most during my tenure here. Now, my mother's class was much larger. There's a picture of her class right there against the brick wall. So there was probably 35, 40 people in this little one-room school. But the teacher, we had one teacher, and she taught grades primer up to the 7th grade. And if she was alive today, she would tell you that she taught cooperative learning, meaning that she would teach the older kids first, the 6th and 7th graders, and then the 6th and 7th graders would help teach reading and back then arithmetic to the primer kids and the 1st and 2nd graders. So there was a lot of activity going on in this little one-room building during the course of the day. The teacher's desk was set where the TV is setting. That was the blackboard against the wall. And we had an old pot-belly coal stove that's set right here that we burned coal every day. There was no running water in this building. Actually, I started here in 1958 in the primer. And up until 1962, we had no running water. The coal pile was in the basement, but there was a pipe that ran underneath this building, and I'm not sure if it was the city water or town water, but we had no water up here, and this little pipe would drip water. So we would take sheets of notebook paper and make them into a cup and get on top of the coal pile and drink our water. Drink our water, yeah. And of course, you can see there was no room for a cafeteria. So my mom would make a sandwich each and every day. Either an apple or orange would be in that brown paper bag, and she would give me a nickel. And that nickel that she gave me every day was for the milk. The white milk was 2 cents, and the chocolate milk was 3 cents. And we would take the white milk and drink it at lunchtime with our sandwich and our apple or oranges. And then the chocolate milk would be during recess in the afternoon around 1 o'clock. Yes, we had no playground equipment. Our parents would take old socks and roll them up into a ball and take a needle and thread and sew them into a ball. And we'd take a broom handle or a mop handle, and we would go in that little yard there where our house sat, and we'd play softball. But what is really interesting is that we would have to walk by the white school every single morning to get to this building. And Pennington Elementary School had all this playground equipment, the swings, the merry-go-round, the monkey bars, and we always wondered why couldn't we have those the same equipment. But like I said earlier, we played softball, and we would take this wall over here and play dodgeball. Take an old rubber ball, and someone would try to throw the ball at you, and you'd be dodging it against the brick wall.
Gee, I didn't grow up in Pennington, nor did I go to school here. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. Ron and I met back in, tell me.
75.
75. Remind me. In Boston. Well, he was living in Boston, and we came here, and I committed to like 5 years. I said, I'll try it for 5 years, and we'll see. And you'll see, 30 some odd years later, I'm still here. And I can honestly say that it's this history that has kept me here. It grabbed me, not just the history of the African American experience in this area, but also the Scotch-Irish. There's so much history in this area that just really has really grabbed me. And so we came to live here, and just as we came to live here, they were going to tear this building down. Ron's family neglected to put a reversion clause in the deed. So the county took the building, the school board took the building, and
well, actually, from I didn't cut you off, but from the time of integration, 1965, up until 1986, when we moved here, the Lee County school system used this building as a Head Start center, and they used it as a TMR center. Yeah. So they kept the insurance up on it, so they just took sole ownership of the building for those years. And as Jill mentioned, when we moved here in '86, the Lee County school system were consolidating. There was closing a lot of schools throughout these little towns here around Pennington, and this was one of the schools that they were closing. And they were going to sell the land, knock the building down, and sell the land to the highest bidder. So I always said that the Lord worked in mysterious ways, because as we was moving here, this was starting to happen, and you can take it from there.
And I knew that this building meant a lot to him, meant a lot to a lot of people that went to school here. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, we've got to do something to, prevent that from happening. And we contacted the Board of Supervisors here, and they just were not real cooperative, to put it mildly. And so we ended up contacting the NAACP, which was in Johnson City?
Bristol.
Mm-hmm. And asked them for their help. We went to them, talked to them, told them what our situation was. And so it took quite a while for us to negotiate something with the county to turn this building over. Remember, his great-great-grandmother built it. Yeah. And so it was actually a point of embarrassing them to turn it back over to the community. And they did. So we got the building, had no idea what we wanted to do with it.
Actually, not only did we make the local news, but we made, I won't say national, but maybe mid-national news throughout North Carolina and all the other surrounding states, that a small black community trying to preserve their heritage in this little building here. And make a long story short, we didn't really know what we wanted to do with the building. We just knew that we wanted to secure it and keep the powers that be from tearing it down. So we got a fellowship to the Highlander Center down in New Market, Tennessee. Yeah. We spent a year at Highlander, and Highlander gave us the idea that very little has been written on African Americans in the coal fields of Southwest Virginia. And so we brought that idea back to the community. Now I think about 1986 was a time when you still had people living who was born in 1900 or 1890. So we realized that it was an elderly population, and we needed to get their stories really quickly. So we bought one of them big old camcorders, and we started videotaping our elderly population, having them to tell their stories. We would have different things called Memorabilia Night, where people would bring artifacts related to this school that they had. We had the original teacher's desk. We still have a desk. That little desk was the type that my mom used when she went to school here. I still have the desk down in the basement of the ones that I used to sit in, one just like the one that I used to sit in. So people brought things like that in. And then we just decided that we wanted to really, I guess, expand. So we started doing what was called holiday traditions in the mountains, where people from eastern Kentucky, northeast Tennessee, would come to these events. We started doing Race Unity Day.
We did that for 20 some odd years here in Pennington Gap. Was celebrated on the second Sunday in June of every year. So we started doing it out at Lehman Field here at Pennington, and it drew people from everywhere, and we connected with the school system. The school system had the students have drawing contests and what race meant to them and that kind of thing, and it was awesome, and we did it for 20 some odd years.
Yeah.
And just as the case with most things, it just started to fall off. But as Ron mentioned to you earlier, we started this year with August 8th. And hopefully August 8th will serve as a regeneration of something to celebrate. And so this was our first year. It was very successful, and the plan is to have it again next year and make it an annual event. But we do events, we do the stories, we get the stories, we work with some of the school teachers, make it a point to bring their students in and talk about who they are. And we encourage young people to talk to whoever they live with, whoever their caregivers are. Get their stories and get their stories documented and how important that is. And we learned that from a lot of the young people that were brought here through the school system, that they said, well, we want to know who we are too. So, so we encourage everyone to, find out who you are, write your stories, get your stories, because if you don't, they're lost forever.
Well, just like this quote by Dr. Carter G. Woodson, I think has stuck with me for the past 30-some years, where he once said, and I'm going to paraphrase it, perhaps the most important element to any given people is the documentation and preservation of their history. If a race has no history, it has no worthwhile tradition, and it could stand to be lost in the eyes of society forever. So I think once we read that, and very little has been written on blacks in this region. So, we are working with Dr. William H. Turner, who wrote the book Blacks in Appalachia, and Bill is our education specialist here, and he's doing research now. We are actually doing research now on black churches and black coal miners. What happened to the black coal miners? And so we are interested to see where that's going to take us to. Yes, we have done workshops, and we got scheduled workshops now with Bluefield College, the Appalachian School of Law, where Jill and I and Kathy will go in and do anti-dismantling racism workshops. We focus on internalized racist oppression. We talk about white superiority, white privilege. We have a one-day workshop and we have a two-day workshop, and it's been very, very beneficial to people. Well, I just think, like you mentioned, we were a community, and the teacher not only was our mentor, our teacher, but she was also our parents during the course of the day. And if we did something wrong, I can recall one day I said something inappropriate as a young boy to a girl, and she made me write on the bulletin board on the chalkboard 100 times. I will not say that again. I will not say that again. So, and then my mom found out about it when I got home, and I got spanking and everything. But yeah, it was a gathering place, not only during school days, but even in the evenings, we would have like little bitty cakewalks and musical chairs and
What about the connection with the
weenie roast, where we would go out in the field and all the parents and the kids, we have a little campfire, and we would take coat hangers and put marshmallows and hot dogs on them, and that was part of the school that sanctioned that. The churches were the connection with the school. Wells Chapel Church, bottom of the hill. My great-great-grandmother built that church too, which is down there. It's such an invisibility of African Americans in this region. I mean, look here, you guys are white and you doing this,
Yeah.
It's we are invisible in this region. I mean, I'm talking Southwest Virginia, Northeast Tennessee, Eastern Kentucky, Southern West Virginia, Western North Carolina. We are just invisible. Me personally, integration was great, but it also, I think, had its setbacks on destroying black family values of how they came together and did things. And because I remember the year that my mom told me that I wouldn't be going to school up at Bland, because I was in the 7th grade when we integrated, and I wanted to go to Bland High School. And Jill always laugh when I say this because of the pretty black girls up there, because I was related, or the word kin. I was kin to everybody here, you know, especially they were my cousins and everything. So I couldn't wait to go to Bland. And I can recall the year that our parents marched us out to the white school and saying, okay, you're not going to go up to the black school in Big Stone. You know, I cried because I really wanted to go, because there was a connection there with our older kids that you just don't see today. There was just so much unity. People were just, you know, they cared for one another. They helped one another. Specifically speaking to the African American youth, I would say, you know, find out where you came from, and those who paved the way for you. Because there was a time in my life that I remember up until the age of 13, 14, I could not go into the theater and sit in the auditorium with my white friends. I had to go up a fire escape and sit in the balcony. I couldn't drink out of every water fountain. I had to go to the one that said colored only. You know, we didn't have $200 sneakers that these kids are wearing today and everything, you know. I had my school clothes every day, then I had my Sunday clothes. You know, I wasn't as fortunate as the kids are today. You know, I think a lot was sacrificed during the civil rights era that a lot of black kids today just takes for granted. That, you know, it's always been like this for me. And even when we are doing some of the dismantling racism workshops, and we have some youth there, and I've heard, and you have heard them say, you know, this race thing is not as bad as people say it is. Now, this is some young African American kids saying this. For 30 years, I traveled the country in helping coal miners to get their federal black lung benefits. I represented them in court. I spoke to different UMWA events throughout the country. But it wasn't until I retired in 2018, 2019, that I realized that every day when I left my house and come down that driveway, I had to put on a whole different face who I thought white America wanted me to be, who I thought my board of directors or my CEO wanted me to be. I could not be Ron Carson. Not to say that it was a big difference, but I had to speak a certain way. I had to dress a certain way. Like I said, I had to become someone who I thought white America expected me to be, the norm. And that is called internalized racist oppression. And every black person on this earth, in my opinion, has that.
Hello, I'm Henrietta Caldwell, and I grew up here in Clinton. I went from 1st to 8th grade here in this school. The building that they tore down was for the 1st through the 3rd grade. And then that room right there was for the 4th and 5th. Then this was the 6th, 7th, and 8th room in here. Okay. Yes.
So they had multiple grades then in one?
We did from 1 to 8. Mm-hmm. This right here, this room right here, because the furnace, they had the furnace around, it was up under here. Mm-hmm. It was up under the floors. But they had, coal furnace. It was coal furnace. Mm-hmm. And our janitor would come and make a fire in the winter and make sure that we stay warm in the wintertime. But in the summer, spring and summer, we just opened our windows. Well, like I said, I grew up here. I lived here in this community. I lived right down the street. And so all I had to do was just walk up the sidewalk and come to school. In fact, all the ones in the community, that's what we did. We walked to school up here. And we would know our teachers personally, because most our teachers came, they lived in Knoxville and Loudon, so they had to travel to come here to be our teachers, The ones really that lived around here, all we had to do was go down the hill and go home and eat our lunch and then come back, because we had about 30 minutes, and, if it didn't take us that long, we still have a little time to play outside, before class started.
By the time you got to Clinton High School, would you say it was just a, I guess, normal high school experience, whatever that is, if any of us didn't have a normal high school experience?
Well, I guess it would be normal compared to what they went through, because we didn't have any incidents when we went to class or anything, and our teachers, they would ask us questions, and we would have to turn in our homework and stuff, so we didn't really have the incidents that they did. I don't think when I was going down there, we didn't really participate in the sports area, like the football and basketball and stuff, But I think after, in the later on, like in the early 70s and stuff, it got better with the sports and stuff,
Yeah. Okay.
And then that's when they built the new high school, and so they made that a junior high school, and so they had it. So it was a lot better. As I say, in the mid 70s, we all knew each other, and if not, even after school, we would still go, like our churches would fellowship with one another, at different churches and stuff. So we really, it was just a family affair.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Do you think that some of that might have been lost with integration, or did it just change and shift somehow?
Well, I guess the closeness did, because the students not being used to being around white teachers or anything, it wasn't the closeness or anything, and I guess it made our learning a little bit more different than it was. If we would be more comfortable here with our teachers than we would, But I guess my teachers, I can say for me, my teachers never made me feel inferior or anything, But I just wasn't as, I knew they was my teachers, and I just went there to learn, and that's it. When we would, in the evening, when we would come from school, I mean, we still had our ball field and stuff up here. If our other community kids, we still had our little softball teams and stuff, and we would play together, and stuff. So we really, I didn't really miss not doing the activities at the school, because we still did it together in the communities.
Yeah, excellent.
Mm-hmm. I think the closeness of our community that sticks. I mean, it just when they wanted to do this and I thought, well, that is, I thought that would really bring our community, together again, because we're used to having, things in the community and stuff other than our church worship, But the closeness of a community, that stands out a lot. Yeah. The thing of it is that our youth today, I don't think they really understand the importance of the history of it. That I think, I was just, Adam and I was just talking about trying to get the community to really realize the history that we went through. It wasn't really just an error or anything, but the closeness and the history of this, it's priceless. Yeah, to get that through to them, that's what we're trying to do, and for them to come and look at the material and see the history of it, that would really, because I noticed one of the little boys Saturday when we was up here, he was saying, "Wow, I can't believe this," and I thought, well, that is great that they could take it in, and I guess he was about 8 or 9, and I thought, well, if he's amazed at this, that would stick with something that would stick with him. It's very important for everyone to know. I mean, like I said, when I go to other museums and stuff, I'm amazed at what I've learned, even when as close as Nashville, or even the Beck Center in Knoxville or anything. I'm amazed at the history that I can learn, as I go through and look, and I guess that's what make it more intriguing, because it's something that, you go through 12 years of school, and, even if you go on, and you don't learn that, but then this history, start looking at the history and seeing the history and everything and learning more, it's something. As a child, we didn't really go out to the yard as a children, because we always had, our houses and things were so close, we just stayed, we stayed in the yard, or we would go to church, or, we didn't venture out of, we didn't go really a lot around Clinton,
Okay.
until we started at high school, but even as a teenager, we didn't go downtown or anything, we didn't buy our own clothes. Our parents bought our clothes and stuff, and so we just, school, home, and church. That was our main. Miss Blair was my first grade teacher, and she was my second grade teacher and third grade teacher. And I had Mrs. Karen Valentine was my fourth and fifth grade teacher. We was in there, and Clifton Moore was my 6th, 7th, and 8th grade here in this room. He was also the principal of our school. Yes, she was really amazing. Yes, she was. In fact, as you told me to spell my name, she learned me how to spell my name when I began in the first grade, and she taught me how to print it. And then by the time I got to the third grade, she taught me. She said, "Now you're gonna have to quit printing. You're gonna have to write it in cursive." And so she really taught us a lot. Yes, because everyone said, "Well, it's really an odd name." So I said, "Well, my teacher learned me how, and so I just learned it from there." And then when I got here in this room right here in the 8th grade, we always we would have our French teacher to come up once a month, or either our Spanish teacher. And so I learned how to write it in French and Spanish. So I was. Yeah. But see, like I guess the books that we had for the 4th grade, it was different than what we had in the 5th grade, and so even though we was in the same room, we was studying out of different books. And it just as in here, you did different things. The 6th wouldn't do what the 8th grade did. By the time you got to the 8th grade, you had to do the advanced work. So
Yeah.
But as you go, each grade would get more advanced than the other. So, like if Miss Blair, she had to ride the bus from Loudon to here, and so if she was a little bit in the wintertime, if the bus was a little bit late or something, one of the 8th graders, we would have to go and be in her classroom till she got there. So that's what we did. Yeah, he would pick. Each one of the 8th graders, different one each time, if how many times it was needed, if the if she was late.
Oh my gosh, I just can't imagine that today. It would be
But
utter
Miss
chaos.
Valentine, she drove, so she didn't have a problem getting here. So
That sounds really, really neat. I think a lot might have been lost without that, just in general, because you don't learn anything nearly as well as when you have to teach it to somebody else.
I know, and even when we got in the fifth grade, we started. I think we had our first. I guess it would be like a little May Day or something that we was able to like dress up. I guess it would be something like a little prom or something like that. That we started that, and then when we got to the 8th grade, we had one, and it was really nice. It was really nice. I've lived here all my life, except when I got married. I moved to Chattanooga for a little bit, for a few years, and then when my mother got sick, I moved back. But I've lived in Clinton all my life.
Really small.
Well, I was small, but I remember it. Yes. Well, it's like I said, we didn't leave the house or anything. We just went by, what we was told. What we, the grown-ups, they didn't in my days. Kids didn't get a lot of information from grown-ups. I really enjoyed Green McAdoo. Coming as a student, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm the director of the Green McAdoo Cultural Center. I really just care a lot about civil rights and the civil rights movement and the history behind it. And the civil rights movement is really what got me into history to begin with. And there's just so many rich stories within it, and it can just give us so much insight onto how to live our lives. And so I just had such an immense interest in civil rights, and I had studied history, got my master's degree in museum studies, and worked with the National Park Service for a number of years at a number of different places. Worked at a couple of museums as well, but when this place came up, I applied and didn't think I would get it, but lo and behold, here I am. They chose me, thankfully, and I've been here since January of this year. Main focus, our number one goal, is to educate people on the story of the Clinton 12, who were really the first students to publicly desegregate a school here in the South. And they were the first students to desegregate a state-funded school here in the South, or in Tennessee. There was one school in Arkansas, in Charleston, Arkansas, I want to say in '53, but they did it under secrecy, and there was a number of problems that came because of them doing it in secrecy. But this was the first state-funded school in Tennessee to desegregate, and this was the first public desegregation. This is the first one to come into the cultural zeitgeist, so to speak. And so we really educate people on what actually happened here, what happened with the students, what happened with the town, how everybody responded to the situation that happened here, known as the Clinton crisis. And so that's our main focus. The second focus that we have is really to evoke some of the same spirits that the Green McAdoo School held, which is bringing community together and offering services and providing for people, really no questions asked. We want to do our best to represent Clinton especially, but we want to make sure that people know that this is a safe space that they can come for help, and they can also come to have conversations and talk and enjoy themselves and have fun. And so we really want to. We're doing a whole bunch of things and advocating. Probably third is just advocating for civil rights of people even today. Yeah. So like Henrietta said, it about. It was early 70s. This place ceased being a segregated elementary school, then became a daycare. Daycare was, I believe, until early 90s, early to mid 90s, it was a daycare. And then eventually the daycare closed down, officially became the Green McAdoo Cultural Center in 2007. These desks are actually of the period. We had, I found this out actually Saturday. The guy who had went and got them stopped by the center, and he told me they drove all the way to Missouri to pick these up. You know, the desks, a lot of the stuff is of the period. A lot of the stuff was, you know, came from the community, came from people who were involved with the story. You know, we have, you know, Sidney Davis's desk, and he was a part of the, you know, the lawyers who helped not only prevent desegregation under the first, you know, the first time that it was challenged here, but after Brown v. Board, he was the one who argued for desegregation. So we have his desk here. We have Horace G. Wells' typewriter, who he was, you know, the editor-in-chief for the Clinton Courier, and he was one of the main voices advocating for, you know, we have to, you know, follow the law during, you know, the the Clinton crisis. He's the one who's advocating that, you know, we need to continue on with desegregation because it's the law of the land. Reverend Turner's family was incredibly helpful and donated countless amounts of letters and documents from his time and his experience going through, you know, this entire situation. And, you know, we've had a number of, you know, luckily families who were involved with the Clinton 12 help out in every way they could as well. So, you know, it's been, you know, building this thing was a real community effort. It really took a lot of hands-on work from them. And so that's how we managed to get all of this really cool stuff. So yeah, well, the early 1800s, this property was a segregated school that had gotten burned down in the, I believe, 1910s from the Ku Klux Klan. They'd came and they'd burned this place down. It was rebuilt under the New Deal from FDR, and it became the Clinton Colored School. There was a separate building, as Henrietta did say, there was a separate building that did like 3rd and 4th grade. But this was the main building. This was the main campus, well, you know, however you want to say it. Shortly after, in the 1940s, they renamed it the Clinton Colored School, and it became the Green McAdoo School. And it was named after Green McAdoo, who was a Clintonian. He was a Buffalo soldier for 20 years. He had worked at the courthouse as a custodian for another 20 years. He was a big advocate in the community. And just a real pillar here up on the hill, which is our neighborhood. And so they had made the decision to name it after him. And so from that point on, you know, kind of what Henrietta said, it was just this combination of an educational hub, but it was also just a huge community hub. This was where kids played. This is where people congregated. This is where, you know, they would have, you know, hey, we're going to go have a couple picnics out here. We'd have picnic tables and slides and all sorts of stuff. So, you know, like Henrietta said, there was 3 hubs. You had your home, you had your church, and then you had the Green McAdoo School. And so it was a real big pillar within the community. You know, the McSwain family, the Dickey family, who, you know, they had challenged desegregation before Brown v. Board. And it was making its way up to the Supreme Court, where Brown v. Board just beat them to the punch. Their argument that they made was that, you know, these black students were driving all the way to Knoxville to go to Austin High School to get their education. The argument that they made in court was that it was separate, but it was unequal. And the key argument they made was that Austin High School was actually nicer than Clinton High School. So that was their big pull, is that they wanted to make the argument that Austin High School, this segregated school, was actually nicer than the white school, which was, you know, kind of radical. Yeah, it's wild to really, you know, and I know Thurgood Marshall was a part of this case as well. And, you know, the argument that they made was to try to, you know, bring the sympathies of white people, try to make white people outraged that, oh my gosh, there's a black school, the black schools are nicer than the white schools. This is unjust. It's not separate, you know, argue that. And so it made its way up to the courts. Brown v. Board beats it to the Supreme Court, where it becomes law of the land. The McSwains then re-challenge the case in front of Judge Taylor. Judge Taylor says, it needs to happen, and it needs to happen immediately, because so many different courts in states had found ways to drag their feet and go, well, we'll do it, but we need to really take a couple of years to really assess the best way to do it. Whereas Judge Taylor said, you have to do it next school year, period, done, figure it out. And so we get to, this is Clinton High School, so Green McAdoo School is not affected by this in any way, shape, or form. There's still the segregated elementary schools here in Clinton. But to get to the Clinton 12, these were 12 students who just lived in the area. As opposed to Little Rock 9, those were hand-chosen kids to integrate the finest school in Arkansas Central High School, hand-chosen by the NAACP. The difference is that these are just the 12 kids who are of age for high school here in Clinton. And so they get chosen, they are, not really chosen, but just kind of, this is what you have to do now. This is the change. And, for the students, it was really tough because, a lot of them had been going to Austin East. They had their friends there. For Bobby Kane, he's a senior in high school, and you have to move to this, you have to go to a different high school when you're 1 year away from graduating, when you're, the big king on campus. So it was a real adjustment period. Day one of integration went relatively okay. There was a handful of protesters, maybe 10 to 15, most of them just dopey kids holding signs. But unfortunately, there was a man named John Casper, who was a part of the White Citizens Council, came from the East Coast, Washington, D.C., New York. He came and he started knocking on doors. Whereas most people, when this first came into place, were either apathetic here in town. I'd say the vast majority just didn't care one way or another. And then the ones who did care, they felt that there was nothing that they could do. John Casper comes into town and he tells them, oh, there is something you can do. He starts knocking on doors and telling people, we need to fight, we can't let this happen. He brings in people from, across the country. These are really mainly the South. People from the South start coming in because Clinton becomes this battleground, and this little town of 4,000 people swells to 7,000 by the end of the week. And they're shutting down schools. People don't know what to do. It gets so crazy that they end up sending in, or they create something called the Home Guard. The police officers couldn't handle the 3,000 rioters, this white mob. They couldn't handle this white mob, so they start knocking on people's doors. And, these are, veterans of the war. And he says, you need to grab your gun. You're officially deputized. So some of these people are accountants. Earlier that day, crunching numbers, and you get a knock on the door and say, grab your gun. We need to protect the town. And what a lot of people get wrong about this particular side of the story is that, a lot of people thought that everyone here was advocating for desegregation, that everyone in the Home Guard was advocating for desegregation. That wasn't the case. They just wanted law and order in town. It had begotten, they didn't want people from outside of Clinton telling them, how to run their town, how we do things. And so they come, the next 2 days, the National Guard gets sent in from Governor Clement, and we got tanks running down the street. We've got, all of the, helicopters and all this military equipment on our football field. It's wild. In tiny little Clinton. Meanwhile, for the students, they're still facing racism and hatred every day. Klan is riding through the Hill, our neighborhood up here, the predominantly black part of Clinton. They're riding through here. They're lighting off dynamite. They're burning crosses in people's yards. They're creating havoc. And so Unfortunately, this isn't this beautiful story of integration gone perfectly well, where everyone comes together. It truly is a situation where there is some very great moments and there's some great people, but it does show the true horrors and the obstacles that these, 12 students faced. I mean, these are kids. All of this happened to stop kids from going to school. And then 2 years, it ends finally with the school getting blown up in the middle of the night. And that was kind of the last straw, and what brought everyone kind of back together is that, this school gets blown up and people realize, all right, we have to finally, enough is enough. This is too much. We need to really make our stand. So the teachers have all unfortunately passed away, but I'm still in contact, with the 12. A number of people who've graduated from Green McAdoo are either a part of our board or come to our events and still talk. So I've chatted with a pretty good amount of them, and they are really excited to tell the story about. They're always excited to tell me the juicy gossip and the dish of stuff that happened here, from fights to, people playing pranks and all the goofy stuff that kids do when they're in high school or in elementary school. And so they're happy to share the experiences that they have. And, the one thing that I always get is that people loved going to school here. And I'd honestly blame that on the educators above all else. I think the educators were truly second to none here. From every story I've heard about Miss Blair, and she just seems like one of those golden apple, like just one in a million teachers that anybody would have been lucky to have. Not to knock public education, but there's a lot of blind spots within public education today. One of the great things that we're able to do is shine a light on one of those blind spots. And I'd argue this is one of the most important moments in American educational history, because it was the first publicized version. This is the first time that it comes into the country's psyche, the South getting desegregated. And so this is really people's first visceral reaction to it. And so we're here to tell what really happened. This isn't about whitewashing the story into making it this beautiful fairy tale where, people get to walk away and feel like, wow, what a wonderful place that we live in today, and that we lived back then, that we overcame this incredible obstacle. Really our job here is to show people that it wasn't easy, that there are so many casualties to this story, that there are so many heartbreaks in this story, but that, these heartbreaks happened in order to allow everybody to have the opportunity to learn, to have access to information, to have an education. One of the most heartbreaking things that I think about when I think about this story is something that Gail Epps told me. Gail Upton Epps now, but
she's one of the original.
She's one of the original, and she's the first black woman to graduate from a previously all-white high school in the South. The first one to do it, and much like everyone else in the Clinton 12. There were points where she just wanted to give up, and she wanted to quit, and she wanted to go back to Austin East, or Austin High School. Now it's Austin East, but she wanted to go back. She didn't want to do this anymore. And her mother would remind her that you're not just going to school so that you can walk across that stage at Clinton. You're walking so that your sister can. And, it's not just about the sister, but it's about every other person after her. This is a 17-year-old girl. This is a teenager, and we're putting that kind of pressure on her. We're putting the pressure of an entire race of people being able to get their education on her. We need you to finish so that everyone else can. Margaret Anderson, who was a teacher at Clinton High School, she would write for the New York Times about what was going on here. And one of her most famous lines was, "We're sending children to do the work of adults." And that is, I think, the perfect example of that, is that here is this girl who's saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do this. I can't face this racism and this hatred. And they're telling, and her mom is telling her, you got to do it so that your sister will have this opportunity, so that everybody else after you can walk through this door. That is what we're here to tell, is that this is so important. It was so important that she walked through that door that first day, and that she walked across that stage on her, when she graduated, so that everyone else had the opportunity to do the same, but that she went through hell to do that. All of them, every single one of the Clinton 12 went through hell to get an education. And we need to remind people of that, that the stories of desegregation and civil rights are not fairy tales, but it shows the will of people, the strength of people, the perseverance to do what's right. And so that's what we do here. That's the importance of the Green McAdoo Cultural Center.
Pauline Douglas. So my father was an educator here at Langston. He taught 8th grade science, Bible. He was also an assistant football coach. He helped with the basketball team, and he cheered on the women's basketball team as well. So he was an integral part of Langston High School. He came, I want to think, maybe mid-56, 57, and until the school closed. And then he went on to teach in Johnson City School System at South Junior High and then at Libertyville. What I say many times is that Johnson City desegregated. They didn't integrate. Okay. Because what happened is everybody at Langston may have gotten a job and may not have. The students went to Science Hill. As you said, it was never a true integration of kids coming here, integrating the teachers that were already in the Johnson City School System at the white schools. Never any of that. So I'll start with, of course, my dad. Something he carried on even when he went on to South Junior High and to Libertyville. But he always dressed for his students, as he'd say. So my dad was always in a suit and tie. He came to school dressed that way every day. He would call students by their last name, giving him that respect. So he never called students by their first name. It was always Miss Douglas or Mr. Dixon or whatever. So he taught that at an early age for them to understand. He did what was then cutting edge experiments. It was hands-on. It was not just a teach from the textbook, but he tried to bring in other elements to teach his classes. So Langston went from 7th grade on up to 12. I would think his classes were fairly small, probably anywhere from 15 to 20. So these are recollections I have mainly from some of my family, because my uncle was very instrumental in pushing for the Johnson City School System to go ahead and desegregate. And the original plan was going to be a phased plan, if I recall correctly. And they wanted to do it class by class and do it over a period of years. And that just wasn't acceptable. So they wanted to go ahead and get the school desegregated, integrate to a certain degree. One of the things I've heard some of my cousins talk about is that they got the hand-me-downs. That Langston didn't get new textbooks every year or whenever, like Science Hill did. And they got Science Hill's old ones when Science Hill would get new ones. So there definitely was a disparity all along. But the thing I guess I remember Dad talking about, and other educators here at Langston, was Langston was the whole person. They didn't just teach kids their school books. They taught them etiquette. They taught them how to be good community individuals. They taught them how to integrate into the community that they had. Again, when you talk about desegregation versus integration, that just sense of community that you had here at Langston. You knew, I would remember stories, and then it happened to me when I started elementary school, of course, after the schools did desegregate. If you got in trouble, you not only got in trouble with the one teacher, but it was probably the principal, and it was then the community. You know, it trickled all the way down before it ever got to your parents. And I had that happen one time at elementary school. And again, it just once, trust me. Because my principal at Northside had been principal here at Langston. And when I got in trouble, when I got called to the principal's office, the first comment was, "Your father's going to be so disappointed in you." Okay. So I'm like, really? Can we just stop this right here? Now, and she made the phone call to Dad. But you had that total sense of community. And it was the village raising the child. You know, I'm looking over your shoulder at the band uniform that's here. You know, it was such a big deal to watch the band march every Thursday night down to the football stadium. And people would gather like it was a Christmas parade, or, you know, there'd be people lining the streets. My cousin was a majorette, and she talks about just the crowd that would be out there. And there, again, that's that disparity. Langston had to play on Thursday night so that Science Hill could play on Friday night. When Langston was here, there was a thriving black business community in Johnson City. And as the schools integrated, that seems to be less and less. That's how I recall. A child's self-worth, self-esteem, you know, it's so important for someone to be able to find somebody that looks like them. And then even more so than that, it's so important to have diversity. We don't live in a vacuum, and it's concerning to think that some children can go all the way till they get to college before they may ever have a different gender or a different diverse educator that's teaching them. And that was lost. I'll come back to a story. My father originally was a teacher at Tanner High School in Newport. So he literally rode the bus from Newport to Johnson City. He was taking care of my grandmother. And because he couldn't get a job in Johnson City. And another educator had mentioned his name, and he got a chance to talk to the superintendent of the Johnson City school system, and that's how he came on board at Langston. So, and it is, and again, it's that whole village, you know. I can remember so many students at Langston talking to me about their experience, my dad being their teacher, and saying, you know, all the teachers here at Langston, you know, the kids were grounded in knowing they could be anything they wanted to be. The sky was the limit. They just had to apply themselves and study, and you could go do whatever you wanted to do. And I think some of that's lost sometimes now. This picture is here in the Langston Center, and this is actually a faculty staff dinner that they had at Langston. And what's really cool about this for me from a personal perspective, here's my parents. They're there. My next door neighbors were the Peelers. This is Ruth and Otis Peeler. He also taught here at Langston. This is the McKinneys, well known in the Jonesborough area from the McKinney Center. My godfather is Paul Christman. He was the football coach here. This is my principal from Northside. That's Rose Carson and her husband. Another dear friends of our family were the Norrises as well, and several others in this picture. But they always talked about how, again, my dad always wore a suit, and the teachers would dress up, and that was standard. It was how they wanted to present themselves to the students all the time, and they'd have these nice, very elegant get-togethers as well. And they carried it on down to what the students would do for their proms and any of their formal get-togethers. The students would definitely dress up. Now, I have to tell a story that my cousin has told, because I think this is cute, and there's another picture that we can refer to. But my father was the class advisor for the class of '62, and my mother's niece was in that class. And at that time, the rule was you couldn't come to the prom unless you had a date. So there was a group of 3 or 4 young ladies that did not have escorts. And they had gone to Dad and explained their dilemma. And he says, well, I'll tell you what, I'll take you. So he went by and he picked up every last one of these young ladies. My mom was with them. And they were so excited. And they hit the door here to go to the dance. And Dad says, hold up. You got to dance with the one that brought you. So he would not let them loose until they each danced with him. So this was another annual event that occurred. There is an organization called the Proto Club. That's for Progress Together. It was started, I want to think, early 50s. There was a group of gentlemen that started the club, a lot of them educators, and they annually would have this soiree. It was a very nice, elegant Christmas dance and dinner. Sit down dinner, have a dance. I had a band that would come in, and people loved to get an invite from a Proto member to be able to attend the dinner. And very, very formal. I loved as a child watching my parents dress up for this. My dad had his tuxedo. My mom would have her gown. And it was just, you couldn't wait to grow up and be able to attend something like this. But this is something that they did annually. And this was another picture that was donated here for the center to have.
It was the Progress Together. I'm assuming that this was a multicultural.
It is. It's a service. It's a service organization still in existence here in Johnson City. It is now integrated male and female, where it started out as all male. And one of the primary focuses of the Proto Club is they do award scholarships every year. So they have a scholarship opportunity for local students.
So I am the supervisor here of the Langston Center.
Okay, and what does that entail?
So pretty much overseeing the facility and creating programs for the facility and really trying to promote the work that we wish to do to the broader community. So we are on the site of what was Langston High School, 1893 to 1965. The Johnson City Comet, which was the newspaper for Johnson City at that time, tells the story that on November the 27th, 1893, children at Thankful Baptist Church, which is right down the street here on Water Street, walked up the hill to their new school. And so in 1893, Hezekiah Hankel, who was our founder, felt that the colored children of Johnson City needed a school for their growth and development, thus Langston School. And of course, they had a few iterations before the 1920s when it became the high school for African Americans in the Johnson City system. And the range was grade 7 to grade 12. So covered a lot of grades, but as I'm sure others have told you from previous interviews, the school was more than just bricks and mortar. It was an anchor institution, and it was a place of encouragement and enrichment. But served as the school until 1965. Desegregation occurs. The school becomes a vocational facility, storage facility, and by 2015 it fell into disrepair. The thought was the whole building would have to come down, but there was a successful alumni effort to save the space, and that led to keeping where we are now, which was the basement of Langston High School, and upstairs, which was the gym of Langston High School, and we now use it for an auditorium. So in many, Virginia is one state, and some areas of the South would fall into this category. The 1954 decision, Chief Justice Earl Warren wrote the leading opinion, and in that opinion he said that the schools should be integrated with this particular language, with all deliberate speed. And that right there is going to be the interesting wording. Not that I'm a legal scholar, but you would see in some southern states where that speed was at a snail's pace. And in some instances, schools would even close. The school systems would just shut down completely so as not to comply with the Supreme Court decision. So yes, in the case of Johnson City, it'd be another 11 years before we would see a full type of integration. And even then, there was a thought process about integrating one grade per year. And so that would again be this all deliberate speed context. And the thought process was that that just would not work. So yes, sadly, this particular conversation, this particular topic, this particular development is why you have someone like Dr. King who is very upset with what he refers to as the moderate. The person who says, well, you know, it's coming, but just why don't you just wait? Why don't you just wait a little longer? You know, we got to crawl before we can walk. And in many of Dr. King's works, Why We Can't Wait, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, Dr. King elaborates on his frustration with the moderate. So the Langston Center is a facility that promotes multicultural awareness. We feel that there is a significant need in Johnson City and Northeast Tennessee to promote that particular area of focus. Multicultural awareness. Frankly, we're not doing white citizens, white children in particular, a service if they go years, or in the case of children, kindergarten to 12th grade, graduate 4 years of college, maybe even 2 more years of graduate school, and the first time they ever interact with someone who is different than they are is in their first job. We feel like that it is very important to expose in a healthy, constructive way individuals to different cultures and have an appreciation for diversity, but also at the end of the day build community. We feel like the best way to do that is through arts, education, and what we call community leadership. So through the arts, we work with a group called LEAD, Langston Education and Arts Development, and they're very focused on producing a number of activities, concerts, plays, things along this line that fall within that arts arena. The education piece, we have a multicultural education program that is STEAM focused. And it's STEAM through this multicultural lens. So we currently have here a poster exhibit focused on women inventors. And we have some excellent educators here that work with our young people, grades 3 through 12, and they focus in that STEAM areas, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. We also have a growing community education program where we look at classes that range from intro to Swahili, intro to Spanish. We have a class on health disparities. We'll have another class on just basic computer education for seniors. So we feel like that, again, through this space, we can focus on a lot of community education. The last piece is the community leadership, and that's where I really focus a lot of my time, is that because of the current social climate, because of recent events, there is a need to proactively lean in and try to find healthy solutions to some of the issues that have developed as of late. And so the Langston Center wants to be a place where we can have those conversations, where we can engage in constructive work that helps us, again, build community and move forward. We see that as a type of community development. And through the Langston Center, yes, we do see the worth of being a hub, or another term I like to use is an anchor. And particularly when it comes to, again, the knowledge of, an empowered sense of knowledge, if you will. Community empowerment is very important. Knowing what you can be, who you can be, what you can do is very important. And when you're working with low-income communities and maybe even youth that have a variety of environmental factors that could suppress, that could demean, that could stunt, I think it's very important to have a space that says that you can, that opens them up to a variety of opportunities, And even for some adults, it's very important to have a place that says you can, if we're willing to put our minds to it and willing to work together and willing to, make that vision a reality. So Langston High School, their mascot was the Golden Tiger. Their colors were gold and blue. Don't ever look at a Langston alumnus and say blue and gold. So their colors were gold and blue. There are still some individuals who remember verbatim the school alma mater, and they sang it with pride, and that was just something about their school. There was a lot of school pride in Langston. So the Golden Tiger and the tiger eyes represent the mascot of Langston High School. The phrase, enter to learn, depart to serve, came from Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune was the founder of what is now Bethune-Cookman College in Daytona Beach, Florida, which is an established historically black college and university. She coined the phrase, enter to learn, depart to serve. And so Langston seemed to have adopted that phrase as its guiding motto. So Langston, it comes from John Mercer Langston, who's the first African American elected to Congress from the state of Virginia. He had Ohio roots and would move to Virginia. And he was also the first dean of Howard University Law School. He would be a mentor to Charles Hamilton Houston, who would later be a mentor to Thurgood Marshall. And so you can just see where there is this intense legal history and how there was this focus on utilizing the law to change the condition of African Americans in the United States. So John Mercer Langston, who's also the great uncle to Langston Hughes, was the individual by which the name Langston comes from. Founder was Dr. Hezekiah Hankel. So there's something to be said about a building like Langston High School that was built with division in mind. And I don't want to get too wonky on you, but 1893, 3 years before legal segregation comes about. Dr. Hankel, in his wisdom, realized where the country was going. And you got to remember, Dr. Hankel was definitely a proponent of the Reconstruction era. He was the first African American elected to the Johnson City Board of Mayor and Aldermen during that Reconstruction period. So he certainly saw the benefit of cultures coming together. On top of that, Dr. Hankel he's biracial. And so Dr. Hankel, his grandparents were German. So he certainly understands the merging and the blending of cultures. There was some wisdom in saying that the colored children of Johnson City needed a school. So there was some worth in having a space for the black children. It's important to note that the space was built because of division. Now here we are at a time when we're trying to promote inclusion. So it's very important that we save these spaces and that we always remember that this space was always built to divide. And now that hopefully we have evolved, now we must use these spaces to promote a greater sense of unity and inclusion. So it's very important for the young white children, the young Latin children, the young Indian children, and any other group under the sun that comes in here, that they see what was, but they also have a good idea as to what we want to be for the future. And so, I'm so grateful that we have staff here that is reflective of different cultures and different walks of life, because that is what we yearn for. And so that's why we need a place like Langston. That's why they need to see the trophy cases to remember that there is a proud history, there is diversity. And so this right here shows diversity from the African American perspective, but there's also unity in diversity. And so we need to learn about our Latin, the Latin experience, and we need to learn from our Latin neighbors. We need to learn from young women and their experience. We need to learn from our Indian community, our Muslim community. There is beauty in diversity, but there's also unity that can come out of that.